and welcome to the 2021 Earth Science Information Partners Summer Meeting Highlights webinar. My name is Megan Carter. I'm the Community Director for ESIP. This webinar will highlight key events of the meeting from many different perspectives. You'll hear from ESIP leaders, from session organizers, from our community fellows, as well as from the staff. So whether you weren't able to attend the meeting or you weren't able to get to concurrent breakout sessions, we hope that you feel like this webinar is for you. We invite you to get involved in one or more of the efforts that you see highlighted here today, and we hope that by the end of the webinar, you might even be inspired to do so. This webinar is being recorded and it will be posted to our YouTube channel for later viewing. If you have questions or comments at any time, we've provided a collaborative document that will be shared in the chat box, and this is where you can type in questions or comments for any presenter. There's a space for each of them. And the presenters will be monitoring this document. Hopefully they can respond during or shortly after the webinar. And this is partly because we have so many presenters, we might not have time for live Q&A. So we hope you'll take advantage of this document. ESIP hosts 2 annual meetings like the one you're going to hear about today in order to connect and create collaborative opportunities for individuals and for organizations working across sectors and across the data lifecycle. These meetings are one of the ways that we help earth science data professionals to find each other, to work together, and to leverage each other's collective expertise to make progress on common data challenges and opportunities, and ultimately to make earth science data more discoverable, accessible, and useful to researchers, practitioners, policymakers, and the public. This summer's meeting was held July 19th through the 23rd. It was fully online, and the theme was Leading Innovation in Earth Science Data Frontiers. For this virtual meeting, we leveraged many of the same tools we've used in the past virtual meetings, including KikoChat, Zoom, Sketch, the ESIP Figshare repository, Google Suite, particularly for collaborative notes documents, and Slido. We also use Wonder for our coffee breaks and other networking sessions. Breakout session organizers again took part in session facilitation training ahead of the meeting to support them in planning the best virtual sessions possible. And again, this was really evident in the quality of the sessions that unfolded. We have asked presenters to contribute their presentations to the ESIP Figshare portal. You can use this URL on the bottom right to access the summer meeting content that's been contributed so far. This includes the research showcase posters that you will not hear much about today. You can also find and access content at the Sketch site. Find the session that you are interested in, click on it, and you can then view the session description, notes, and presentations. Of course, we will keep linking content as it becomes available to us, so it's not too late to deposit your presentations in Figshare, and we highly encourage you to do so. All breakout and plenary session recordings can be found on our YouTube channel in the 2021 ESIP Summer Meeting playlist. I know many of you were anxious to hear about when they would be available, and they are all fully available now. So here are just a few stats about the meeting. I'm sure we could have come up with a lot more, but we had 461 total attendees, one of our largest meetings to date, including 171 first-timers. The meeting featured 4 plenary sessions, 37 community-led breakout sessions and workshops, and these sessions collectively featured over 150 people who served as either organizers or speakers. So you can see that our meetings are truly community-led and community-driven events. Here's a virtual photo of participants in KikoChat. This is our virtual photo, but it's actually only part of it because we had so many participants, I couldn't fit them on the screen. So now we're going to get to the highlights section. We're going to start with highlights from 2 of our 4 plenaries. I encourage you to take a look at the recordings of all of them, including the 2 that are not highlighted here. First up, we'll have Leslie Shee, who will talk about the opening plenary, Innovate at ESIP. So take it away, Leslie.
Thanks, Megan. So this session provided an opportunity for NASA, ESIP, and USGS investigators to talk about their work and show how their big ideas can help solve common challenges in the scientific community, increasing the potential for their technology to be infused or reused. I'd like to thank my co-conveners, Annie Burgess and Sarah Lubkin, and our awesome panelists, Katie Baines, Dana Ostrenga, and Tracy Pallone, and all of the speakers. So our takeaways. Storytelling is difficult and often not the first tactic used to explain technical projects, but it can be very effective, and a project story can be cultivated with help from peers and mentors. Projects that have been built through grassroots community effort can have a leg up related to users and infusion potential. And I think we really saw that there's an amazing amount of work being done across NASA, USGS, and ESIP, and highlighting this work to potential end users in and around ESIP moves our community forward, and it was very fun. So thanks. Hope you can watch the recording if you missed it, and I hope we can do that again.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Next up, we will move on to Ahmed Eilish, who will be highlighting the plenary held in honor of Dr. Peter Fox.
Thank you very much, Megan. I'm Ahmed Eilish. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to report that our plenary honoring Dr. Peter Fox and his legacy was a success. I'd like to thank everyone at ESIP for helping me out, put the session together, and of course, our spectacular speakers. Our takeaways, we heard from Dr. Bob Hazen about how multidisciplinary collaborative research is really pushing the envelope from his perspective in mineralogy and generally producing really compelling research. We also heard from Marshall Ma about how informatics really can be made down to earth and accessible to users and researchers of all levels of expertise, and some examples of how he has gone about building such experiences with Peter when he worked with him, and now moving on in his career. And an interesting discussion that came up was this idea of systems versus frameworks, and this tension between reliability and flexibility when it comes to data infrastructures. Peter was always a proponent of frameworks and of flexibility and of loosely coupled approaches when it comes to developing data infrastructures. And I look forward to continuing the conversation. Please contact me if you would like to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. So next up, we're going to move on to the breakout session highlights. These will be a series of 2-minute lightning talks as well. We'll keep strict time as well, so speakers, please try to be cognizant of that. If one speaker is highlighting more than one session, they'll have 2 minutes per session. I've asked each presenter to provide information on how to learn more and how to get involved. And if you have questions, please type them into the Google Doc that has been shared in the chat. This is really the best way to have a communication with the many presenters today. And you can also leave comments or questions that they can respond to later. So we're going to move on to our first speaker, which will be ESIP's Vice President, Denise Hills, who will tell us about a very special session on ESIP in 2031.
Good. Aloha, everybody. Since I don't know what time zone you're all in, aloha is a great way to say hi without relying on morning, evening, etc. So ESIP in 2031 the concept was hatched by Bruce Caron, and unfortunately he couldn't be here today. But what he was hoping to do is, and what we all were hoping to do who were involved in the session, is to look at where we think ESIP should be in 2031. So utilize what is called a future present structure, where we're living in the present, but we essentially role play that we are in the future. And we did that so we could look back on the decade between 2021 and 2031 to see where we think ESIP strengths are going to grow and build and really make an even bigger impact on making data matter and making earth science data matter in particular. The common things that we kept coming up with, or that were themes and threads throughout all of this, is that the innovative meeting structure, the innovation and proactiveness of ESIP overall, that ESIP is a welcoming community that is fully embraced, developing new partnerships and funding possibilities, particularly to address global climate change crises. And it really came down to the community, to acceptance of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, as well as in-person meetings remains the best earth science meetings anywhere. So thank you very much. Reach out to me or Bruce Karen if you have questions, or any of the participants in the session.
Thank you very much, Denise. Moving on now, we will be hearing, oh, I think I skipped, no, I didn't. We will be hearing from Bill Tang, who will be telling us about identifying technology capabilities that meet wildfire science and practitioner requirements.
Thanks, Megan. Wildfire is very much in the news, unfortunately. Most of it is doing fire, which in the figure on the right along the top is the middle of the wildfire management phases. The other phases range from prediction on the left to long-term recovery and monitoring on the right. How can formally encoded knowledge about disasters like wildfire enable data information interoperability across these wildfire management phases? In the same figure from top to bottom is the tracing of data to decisions, or more appropriately, decisions to data. And how can decisions and their corresponding domain practitioner requirements be traced or mapped to data and related technology solutions? These two questions framed this workshop, jointly organized by the Agriculture and Climate Cluster and the Semantic Harmonization Cluster. We began with two invited domain experts who provided the wildfire problem statement and requirements, one from the US Forest Service and the other from the City of Boulder, Colorado Fire Department. We then had two concurrent breakouts, one to map requirements to potential technology solutions, corresponding to the second and third takeaway bullets shown on the left. The other breakout focused on knowledge representation for wildfire planning and execution, which can be summarized by the first takeaway bullet. This breakout group developed a concept map in real time, a portion of which is shown at the lower left, related to wildfire fuel sources. It's a red dashed arrow from machine readable representation to this concept map, because the map is the beginning of the process towards being machine readable. Sounds interesting? Please check us out via the two links shown at the lower right. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Just a quick check on our collaborative questions document. I don't see anything in there yet, but please do add to it if you'd like. So next up, we'll hear from Kelsey Bresman, who will talk about designing a public portal for participatory environmental governance.
Thanks, Megan, and I know it's a tongue twister. So yeah, we worked on designing a public portal for participatory environmental governance. We're currently working under an ESIP lab grant, and the idea is we work with environmental justice communities directly to try to understand how they see and process data that is used to govern how facilities do and don't emit pollutants in areas that they care about. And we hope that this is just the very, well, we plan that this is just the very beginning of a project to more directly connect, how environmental governance looks on the ground with how it is actually done at the federal level, and whether we can incorporate, how we can incorporate community-based governance into that through various means of data science, community monitoring, communities being involved in permitting conversations. So this specific exercise took user stories, realistic user stories, and I had breakout rooms where folks went into them and tried to look at, how would I discover this? If this was my problem and my area of concern, how would I go about trying to figure this out so that I could make a reasonable public comment? Or if it doesn't fit in a public comment, what would I do? And I was blown away, by the way, by the attendees from ESIP. I had a great time in the session. Folks seemed to be super engaged. They left me really useful notes that I can use for years to come. And there's been people showing up at our ongoing EU meetings you as Environmental Enforcement Watch. And any of you are also welcome to come in and drop in and kind of see what we're working on. We'd love to see what you're thinking about. We're hoping to have this longer process continue for several years. So your guidance and input is always welcome. Thanks.
Thank you, Kelsey. Moving on, we'll hear from Carl Benedict to tell us about the workshop about the Data Management Training Clearinghouse.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we had a great opportunity working with the ESIP community that came into the workshop to essentially both communicate with folks the progress that we've been making in bringing our enhancements to the Data Management Training Clearinghouse that have been funded by IMLS into or closer to production, and with a particular focus in this case on the resource assessment capabilities. As we broke into a couple of breakout groups, and again had a very engaged group in both of the rooms that we were working in, and got some great feedback on the initial capabilities that we were demonstrating. Where of course the first message that we received very loudly and clearly was simplify, 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 both in terms of the types of surveys that are going to be most effective and useful in the vast majority of cases, and then also in how we present the survey results, both to users who are wanting to be able to use them to filter and sort resources, but also in the information that we can potentially provide to resource creators. We need to absolutely be more clear in labeling our options for feedback and what we're asking our users to do in terms of either accessing or submitting feedback. And also that we really need a standard survey that is useful for all instances. And then if we want customized, more detailed surveys, to have that as an additional option, but certainly not one to push up front. We encourage everyone to check out the clearinghouse, the production clearinghouse here, but then also to reach out to us so we can demonstrate the development clearinghouse. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. So next up, we'll hear from Carla McAuliffe, the chair of ESIP's Education Committee, about the teacher workshop.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carla McAuliffe, and I would first like to acknowledge that the ESIP Teacher Summer Workshop is one of our flagship programs that we've been doing for a number of years. And without the input of Margaret Mooney and Becky Reed, it would not have been the huge success that it was. In general, the entire Education Committee also contributes to planning, but I wanted to call out those two folks for all their hard work. We had a number of teachers. We had 50 teachers that registered. Not all of them showed up, but we did have a large distribution, as you can see in the map there, of teachers across the country. I encourage you to take a look at our agenda with links to the session resources. That's a Google Doc that when you have access to the slide deck, you can click on it and see all of the presenters, their resources, and a short blurb about their presentation. We've also started a YouTube playlist for the recordings from the teacher workshop. If you go there right now, you will see 2 recordings because they are big and it's taking me a while to get them up there, but we will have them up there. We also had another exciting thing that 4 teachers received Funding Friday grants as a result of their participation in the teacher workshop and then coming to Funding Friday. Over on the left there, I know that looks like a whole lot of tags. I just wanted you to have a quick opportunity to see all the different tools that were actually used in the teacher workshop. If you want more information, you can certainly subscribe to the Education Committee mailing list or attend our next Education Committee meeting, which is Thursday, August 19th, 2 p.m. Eastern. And we really do want to thank ESIP for funding all 4 of our teachers. Normally 3 awards are given out, but 4 did apply, and ESIP gave them each classroom grants, and we're eager to find out what happens. That's it.
Thank you, Carla. And I would just echo that the workshop was one of the most highly reviewed sessions from the meeting. So thank you to you and to all those who contributed. Next on our agenda, we'll hear from Chris Linus about foraging for dataset usage relationships.
Thanks, Megan. So the Discovery Cluster has been working for about 1.5 years now on a usage-based discovery tool that allows you to search for data based on how you plan to use it, rather than based on the metadata characteristics. And the tool's in pretty good shape, but what we need now is we really need to populate the graph database that underlies it, which has links between research articles and the data sets that they use. And so what we did is we had a forage fest, if you will, at the ESIP summer meeting. And we sent all of our participants, split up into 5 teams, out into the wilds of Google Scholar to look for links between data sets and research articles. So we got 100 new entries found by the participants, which we thought was really good considering they only had about 40 minutes to do the actual foraging. And we put those into the usage-based discovery tool since then. We also executed an after-action survey. And in that, we asked a few questions, a couple of which I'm showing here. One is, given that it seemed to be so much easier when research paper authors would cite data sets, but via their DOIs, should ESIP continue to emphasize that, both in usage-based discovery, but more as a general practice as well, because we have been pushing that for some time. And so most of the survey respondents, I think because they had to suffer through a lot of articles where the DOIs were not properly cited, said, yes, we should definitely continue to push that. Another question we asked was whether they had any fun foraging. And this was not just a whimsical question. Well, okay, it was a little whimsical, but what we really wanted to find out was, how viable is this sort of crowdsourcing model for achieving human curated links between data sets and articles. And so if you want to help, remember, this is fun. We have some survey responses to prove it. If you want to get involved in this, we'll be having our next cluster meeting next Thursday at 3 o'clock. And so you can see the details down there.
Thank you, Chris. And I am delighted to report that we have a couple of questions in the collaborative document for you, Chris. So please head over there. And thank you to those who have added their questions. Thank you. So we'll move on now.
Yes, I'm Kurt Hamill. I represent, can you hear me?
Hang on one second, Kurt. I realize I'm missing your slide. So I think we're going to move on to Douglas Rowell quickly while I figure out where your slide is.
Thanks, Megan. And so this is the first session of our 2-session track on the AI data readiness, which is community-driven efforts. And the first session focuses on a community-driven roadmap for data centers and tools. And in this session, we have more than 90 community members contributed feedback on a checklist that the data readiness cluster is developing for defining the AI-ready data assessments. And from the figure on the right, you can see that most participants are from the data provider manager role, and we are expanding our efforts to reaching out to the community who have more experience with AI and machine learning development. The key takeaway for this session is that there are existing and similar efforts that have synergy with the AI-ready data, such as analysis-ready data and other efforts. And we need to identify the gaps between our AI-ready and other existing efforts. The second takeaway is that how to define and document data quality, and it's one of the key components people have been mentioning a lot during our session. For our breakout, we have more than 40 people participated in the data quality discussion. And the next step for this, for the data readiness cluster, is a conversation with relevant groups, and we'll be on a discussion tool to talk with different groups that is relevant and refine the checklist and guidelines for development. And if you have any questions, please contact me or Tyler, or join our data readiness cluster using the link on the slides. And for our second session of this track, which is on the training data, I will actually pass it to Mark.
Hi, can you all hear me all right?
Perfect.
Okay, thanks, Douglas. Yeah, so this was sort of a companion session that was led by one of the NASA Earth Science Data System working groups focused on data interoperability for machine learning data, which is partnered closely with Douglas's cluster. And so we were getting into a bit more specifics in looking at specifically what does ML training data interoperability actually mean. And we had 3 presentations of different examples of sort of training data reuse or development of quite different examples, and then broke into Breakout to discuss what training data really means, or interoperability really means. And the basic takeaways is that to enable these machine learning applications, training data needs to be user-friendly, extensible, like regular old data, but also with these benchmarking codes, that it's often, you can't necessarily totally separate the training data from the benchmark algorithms that are associated with it. And sort of related to that is that interoperability of training data isn't really all that different from interoperability writ large. There's just some specifics that come out, for example, labeling, perhaps different access patterns, in that you might be accessing things in the cloud and in more random or more frequent methods. Also, maybe we want to tailor to specific machine learning pipelines and tools. But in a sense, it's really just a new designated community for archives. And just like we've had to serve different, analysis ready data for modelers, now we need to serve data for artificial intelligence and machine learning. And so our next step is to summarize some of this and try and summarize what those key aspects of machine learning interoperability are, and look at it some more use cases and hopefully produce some initial guidelines. Thank you. And again, if you have questions, please feel free to contact me. And although it's a NASA working group, anybody's welcome to participate. Thanks.
Thank you so much to Douglas and Mark. So we are now going to break pattern, and we are going to have Kurt Hamill share his screen about the ESIP Air Quality Hackathon. And since we have a moment before he starts sharing, I might encourage you to head over to the document, see all the chatter that's happening there, and consider adding a question yourself.
Hey, Megan, I'm showing the participant screen sharing is disabled. Can you turn me on?
Okay, I will enable it for you. All right, you should be able to now.
Okay, let's see. Tell me when you can see my screen.
We're not seeing anything yet.
Okay. Let me do this. Let me just go to share screen. What's that?
Looks like we can see it now, yes.
Okay. Let's see if I can make it work in presentation mode. Is that any better?
We're not seeing it in presentation mode, but it's nice and big for us. It would be okay to go ahead.
All right, we'll just do that then. Well, first of all, I did want to thank Megan. Thank you so much. You have a gift of organization, and you truly have a heart for community. It really is a part of the ESIP experience to build community, and you really exemplify that. I think our air quality cluster, we thought that a hackathon could build community, so we put together a challenge, and we invited the participants to be a part of it. We had actually 7%. I saw the numbers there, 461 attendees. 7% of all the registrants showed up and divided themselves into 2 groups. And both of them were challenged with a problem set that is about taking science and making it available to non-science users. And I heard Kelsey's presentation and Bill Tang's earlier too. That sense of innovation is a theme that went through the ESIP summer meeting. We offered ArcGIS Online. It's a technology that allows anyone really to get into the cloud and to share information, build applications. And we actually have a competition, and this competition has been going on for the month of August and will culminate in a presentation on the 26th. So we'd encourage everyone who's interested in taking a look at how local government can reach individuals, non-scientists with actionable information about the air quality around them. That was the problem set that the Deputy Mayor of Los Angeles put forward, and she and her team have been leading that. And then one of the administrators of Cheverly, Maryland put forward the other problem set is using citizen science to really assess and adapt to change in that local area in the town of Cheverly. So at any rate, please screenshot this slide if you would. Join us on the air quality cluster. Send a note to Mike Little or Beth Huffer. Both of them run our air quality cluster, and we were grateful for a chance to bring this idea into the ESIP summer meeting. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kurt. Thank you also for rolling with the changing circumstances here on this webinar, and for bringing innovation to the summer meeting. So I will now pivot back to sharing my screen, which hopefully looks as it should. And we will now move to Ziheng Sun, who will talk about new frontiers in AI for Earth and space, big data, and parallel computing.
Thanks, Megan. Hi, everybody. So our session is about the new frontiers in AI for both Earth and space. And this year's session, this summer session, is one of our most successful sessions. We have about 80 attendees show up. We have two sessions actually. One session is a presenting mode, and the other session is a training tutorial session. So we have several speakers from the industry leaders like Microsoft and Anaconda to give us introduction about the industry experiences on how the AI is being used and how it should be used on the Earth data. So we have two big themes, like big data and parallel computing. The Tom from Microsoft introduced how to use the stack, the desk, and the planetary computer to process the big data residing in the cloud at Arrow in the Microsoft. But I think that most of the techniques is also reusable somewhere else, like AWS or other commercial clouds. And yeah, the James from the Anaconda introduced the level of the code reproducibility, and they introduced that probably there are 9 levels of reproducibility. Each of those came with a cost and some benefits. Like if you have a higher level of reproducibility, probably you should invest a lot more effort, but the results will be better because other people will reuse your workflows more easily, and it will save a lot of cost overall, like the cloud cost and the time spent on that AI experiment. And also Ryan and I also talked about the workflow, how to manage the whole life cycle, not only the model training, but also the pre-processing and the post-processing, because that is probably the most time spent on, and most of the resources of the project is spent on the 2 steps. So we talked about how to manage the whole life cycle using the existing advanced cyber infrastructure. And also Cindy probably will talk about the AI ethics. And we are collaborating with other groups like the NASA ESDIS working group on a paper. And also we have a lot of activities going on right now. So if you are interested, you can join the machine learning cluster monthly meeting and check us out. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we'll move on to Rich Signell, who will talk about another very popular session, The Saga Continues, Cloud Optimized Data Formats.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Megan. Yeah, this session was organized by Amy Barchowskis, and this is really, I think, maybe the 4th or 5th time we've had a session on cloud optimized data. The cloud providers are really desperate for us to give them some best practices, as are the data providers themselves. We had 6 different lightning talks. They were on how to create cloud optimized data, how to use cloud optimized data. And I think actually one of the most interesting things was this. Traditionally we've focused a lot on services, right? Like APIs for accessing data, and there were the proponents of still using APIs, and then there were on the Pangeo project, kind of like what Zizek just talked about, they're there was a focus on just accessing the data directly from object storage itself. And so there's this kind of like split between, do we want APIs? Do we want cloud optimized data formats to be accessed directly? And then there was a talk about the environmental data retrieval API. This is a new API from OGC, which in some sense is kind of like realizing, hey, we don't have to pick one or the other, right? Like the EDR API backend that was demonstrated in the talk actually runs on sort of this Pangeo X-array Dask infrastructure at scale on the cloud, but then presents a service that people can use to say, just, process a whole bunch of data on the back end and just retrieve a little bit of streamflow data, say, something like that. So, I think it was a really interesting session. There's still a lot of interesting work to do in this regard. And, please come and join the cloud computing cluster, and the contacts are there in the bottom right.
Thank you very much, Rich. And I realize it doesn't show exactly how to join, but if you go to esipfed.org/collaborate, you can find how to join all of these different collaboration areas that you're hearing about. And the next meeting of the Cloud Computing Cluster is Monday, August 23rd, so you can get involved very soon. So next we have a late breaking submission from Steve Diggs on community data, the Curate-a-thon.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see so many people active in our community doing community work. And I wanted to say up front that we draw on all of your expertise to do what we need to do. So we had a community curate-a-thon, and our original intent was to look at the data so that we would have an opportunity to see if it was fit to be put in a repository for public use. And that took a quick turn into really taking a deeper look at the available data that were there. So our takeaways were, even though I had to FOIA the data to get it, it was obscure, but on the web. But the information is compartmentalized. But there doesn't seem to be any HIPAA concerns with the residents' personal information for tap water, water quality in Flint. My on-site visit added pretty critical background information and context to getting the data and the history of the problem in the Flint area. And then the consensus of the people who attended our session was that the existing data are really not fit for use, other than what it seemed like from the Fed attendees noticed sort of a thing where it looked like there was an agency directive to do water sampling, and that was done, and they were able to check that box. There doesn't seem to be any ill intent, but the outcome is still the same, that it's going to be very hard to use the existing data for water quality sampling and to make any definitive statements about policy going forward. So we have entered into the gap analysis phase, and we'll be working with the community resilience cluster and the air quality cluster for their experiences to see how we move forward. If you want more information, contact the co-chairs, myself and Andrea Thomer, or our Rockstar ESIP fellow, Marion McKenzie, and our next session will be on Wednesday, September 8th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Just took a quick look at our Q&A document. Looks like there's some questions about the cloud optimized session. And Steve, there's a question for you even. So thank you all for contributing to that. Next up, we will hear from Kathy Todd Brown on dynamic soil information systems.
Thank you. So in this session, we had 3 10-minute talks followed by a panel discussion, followed by a breakout session. The 10-minute talks were addressed sort of aspirations of where we want a soil information system to go. We heard from GLOSIS, which is out of the UN FAO, and how they have structured their most recent ontology for soil information exchange. We heard from the US agency responsible for serving the US soil information and what sort of challenges they run into in their database service there. And then we also heard from a project out in Australia who are taking soil information from agricultural sites and trying to combine information from different servers and sort of what challenges they're running into. Led for a really interesting panel discussion between those 3 groups. And I think there were some new connections that were made. And then we also took a breakout session to maybe revise and extend a living document on what the available soil semantic resources were and sort of who was working in the soil information space. That was a little less fruitful. People basically used the breakout session to talk to each other, and that was fantastic. So while we didn't actually come out with a working document, I think there were a lot of new connections made. And if you're interested in soil informatics at all, I would invite you to join the cluster, our cluster calls.
Thank you very much. Next, we're going to move on to Bob Downs, who's going to tell us about 2 different sessions that he was a part of.
Great, thank you very much, Megan. And the session I'll talk about first is the care principles for ESIP data repositories. And this was a part of the Sustainable Data Management Cluster effort. The session was led by Margaret O'Brien, Ruth Dewar, and Shelley Stahl. And for those who aren't familiar with the care principles, they refer to collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics for data that are on the report on the lands or represent the lands of Indigenous people or talk about Indigenous people or from Indigenous people. And so the goal for our session was to discuss recommendations for repositories to implement the care principles and to get feedback from the ESIP community. And what we're doing in the cluster is we're looking at how repositories can implement the care principles along with the trust principles and the FAIR principles. And we had a great discussion, and our takeaways are that we really need to continue this discussion, and ESIP can help us do that. And this won't happen independently. It's really a community effort. And we really need a guideline or a roadmap to guide us. And the other important issue is that the guidance for repositories will differ from the guidance for researchers. So please, there's the information, contact information for Margaret O'Brien. We'd like to have you get involved in the Sustainable Data Management Cluster activities. And then for the other session toward improving representation of data quality information, that was an effort of the Information Quality Cluster. Our chair is Yaxing Wei, and others include, other co-chairs include Gapang, David Maroney, Rama is our former chair, and I'm one of the co-chairs as well. And we discussed efforts to improve data quality information. And we had great presentations. David Green, the program manager of the NASA Disaster Applications Program, he talked about making data decision ready. Jasmine Muir from Frontiers SI in Australia talked about trust in Earth observation data. And Dave Jones and Karen Moe talked about the evolving operational readiness levels within ESIP's disaster lifecycle cluster. And we also had great discussions. We recognize that it's not just work that's done in a vacuum. There are lots of different stakeholders involved, such as data producers, decision makers, science users, data managers, educators, learners, and more. Our takeaways were data quality information is needed to support various data uses, including scientific and decision-making. Collaboration is needed among diverse teams that might include these groups. And after developing guidance for representing data quality information, the community will need help to meet the challenges of producing rich data quality information. Please consider joining the Information Quality Cluster and the information there on your screen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob, for generously highlighting multiple sessions. And I continue to be delighted with all the activity I'm seeing in the Q&A document. If it makes sense to leave your name with your comment, please don't hesitate to do so or leave them anonymous. So now we're going to pivot to seeing the meeting through the eyes of 3 of the 7 of our phenomenal community fellows who supported the meeting. They've supported many collaboration areas throughout the year. I think their perspectives are some of the most important and interesting. So first up, we will hear from Qian Huang, who will report out on the disaster lifecycle session.
Thank you, Megan. Hi, I'm Qian, the ESIP fellow of the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster. So first, I think the summer meeting was awesome. I assisted with 7 sessions and all of them were great. One of the most impressive sessions I've attended is the delivering trusted data to real users and decision makers, organized by Karen Moy and Dave Johns. The session attracted 52 attendees from governments, private sectors, NGOs, academics, and they have all kinds of data such as infrastructure, satellite data, geospatial, climate, and ecological data. And the session identified how the ecosystem of innovation works. This is a framework, the blue one, and how ESIP cluster can plug into this process by introducing their product, service, method, and incorporating ORL ranking. So the ORL model is an operational readiness ranking. 1 is the highest level of operational reliability, while the 4 is the lowest. There were some very valuable takeaways from the session. First, the data quality and data trustworthiness are very important for collaboration with end users. And second, important for data providers to know what data disaster responders want and need. Also for responders to be showing what is available, possible. And third, application dependent ORL are needed. So if you want more information, please contact Karen and Dave or join the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster mailing list. And our cluster meeting is on the first Thursday of every month at 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern time. So as a community fellow, I think what is very important for me is to know that ESIP is a great platform for collaboration, for sharing good ideas and making them come true. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we'll hear from Christina Faust, who will talk about the Enviro Sensing session.
All right. So yeah, hello everyone. I am the Enviro Sensing Fellow, and the Enviro Sensing session was a series of lightning talks on innovation in the field. So a few of the takeaways that I had from these talks was that graduate students, and something that we've been talking about, looking at developing video microtutorials and working on knowledge retention, is that graduate students often fill the role of their lab's technical expert, if there isn't a higher technical expert, with the most hands-on experience collecting data and troubleshooting equipment. And that knowledge retention across generations of lab students is really important to maintain data integrity. And that next, looking at more affordable sensor tech tends to require more experience, so programming or et cetera to set up and use. So there's kind of a trade-off between affordability of sensor technology and sensor setups and experience required to make that work well. And then last thing that I took away kind of from the entire ESIP experience or this meeting is that ESIP semi-annual meetings provide an incredible amount of exposure for students and new professionals. I've met so many people working in different fields. It's given me a much broader perspective on science and exposure to a whole new variety of careers in STEM and data science that I had not been previously aware of. So incredible exposure for new professionals. If you guys are interested in joining the Enviro Sensing group or curious about what we're doing, Enviro Sensing focuses on in situ environmental monitoring and movement of data. You're welcome to contact me, Christina, or Scotty Strachan. And our next meeting is the first Tuesday of September, so that'll be September 7th.
Thank you, Christina. Next, we will hear from Cindy Lin to give her perspective on the New Frontiers in AI session.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cindy Lin. Thanks, Megan, for the introduction. And as Jensen has mentioned before, I'm here just to really elaborate further on what we have talked about in our session called New Frontiers in AI for Earth and Space. And specifically, I guess it would be interesting to talk about some of the environment and social impacts of AI, because I do feel like that has been a resonant theme throughout the summer meeting itself. So the first takeaway that we had from the session was that parallel computing involves mitigating and understanding the infrastructure and physical constraints of any institution. For example, like the kind of hardware that we might have exposed or we might have access to, sorry. And we had the privilege to have Tom from Microsoft AI for Earth to provide both a demonstration as well as a speaker session on the planetary computer from Microsoft, which has been gaining a lot of traction among the Earth and environmental sciences community, right? So that is that a way forward for Earth and environmental scientists who do not have the infrastructures to store large and big data? That could be a question to ask in further sessions. The second takeaway is that the AI workflow also includes an understanding of the environmental impacts of AI. A recent non-peer-reviewed article that's being published by Google researchers have shown that Google's advanced chatbot Mina consumed 96 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, or about the same as powering more than 70 homes for a year. So I think this is an important thing to take note of as we begin to start integrating more of and environmental sciences with AI processes. And last but not least, I want to give a shout out to two other sessions that I really like during ESIP called the CARE Principles and how to include indigenous communities into data governance, as well as EDGI's environmental enforcement platform, because both of these sessions really touch on some of the important topics around AI and data ethics. If you're interested to talk more about these topics as well as the technical aspects of AI, please come to the ESIP Machine Learning Research Cluster every third Friday from 12 to 1 p.m. And the next session is on August 20th. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. And thank you to all of our presenters. Please keep adding to the Q&A document. And I will now pass it to Susan Shingeldecker, ESIP's Executive Director, to close the session out.
Thank you, Megan. Wow, that was so impressive. I'm almost dizzy from a whirlwind tour of a full week of content in just 54 minutes or less. And it is our goal and our hope to provide more opportunities for cross-cluster collaboration. And sometimes it's hard to know where to get started. So I hope that this has gotten you excited in a couple new areas that we can each dig in. Thank you to everyone for sharing these reports. I really appreciate it. All of this is possible because of all of you. So looking forward, I would like to point out a few of the various ways you can jump in and get involved in ESIP now before the next meeting, because ESIP's active 365 days a year. You are welcome to join one of the existing collaborations, many of which were mentioned in various talks. There's no need to RSVP. You can just, if you see a call on the ESIP community calendar found on our website, you just simply click and join. You can consider applying also for ESIP lab support, which is more than just small grant funding. The lab helps projects by exposing and building collaborations around them. This afternoon is a perfect example of that, where Jake Giron will be presenting on his Lake Pi lab project on the IT&I webinar series. So you can check that out later today. You can also encourage your organization to become an ESIP partner and more. You can apply or encourage others to apply to be community fellows. You actually can forward our current job posting for communications manager and bring new great staff into ESIP for us. Over the last 20 plus years, thousands of individuals have contributed in numerous ways to build this incredible community. We invite you to contribute in the way that is most useful for you, and we thank you for your efforts on that. Finally, if you're not already subscribed, I highly encourage you to join the ESIP Monday Update mailing list to get just one weekly message summarizing all that is going on in and around ESIP. That brings our webinar to a close. Thank you to our speakers and our session leads who really pushed the envelope to create excellent breakout sessions and to report on them today. I want to take a moment to thank our federal agency sponsors, NASA, NOAA, and USGS. Without their support, none of this would be possible. I also want to thank our meeting sponsors, Esri, Microsoft, and Element 84. Like our agency partners, it's not just a contribution of money that we get from these partners. It is a contribution of technology and talent and skills. So many times I hear people's names mentioned throughout, Tom and Dan from Microsoft, Kurt and Lorraine from Esri, Tracy and Jeff and others from Element 84. It is people that makes a community. Their financial support is so vital to this community, but it is really the time, the treasure, and the talent that all of our partners bring that make ESIP the incredible community that it is. Lastly, I have to acknowledge our ESIP staff for all of their hard work to pull off a meeting like this. It wouldn't be possible without all behind the scenes efforts. Thank you for your attendance and participation today. And as a reminder, this recording will be made available on the ESIP YouTube channel shortly. Thanks so much.